Graham. Good afternoon. Welcome to Frankenstein Tea. Frankenstein Tea is a daily short story program brought to you by the Island Free Library. With me, it is a chance for us to check in with each other, maybe get stuff off our clothing, as this acts like a mirror. I don't know what that is. A chance for us to check in with each other and say hello and share some literature. I read an adult short story. That means it has adult themes, topics, language, storyline, that kind of thing. I try to read every day at 3 o'clock. I'm having tea today. You've heard me say before that lemon was never my thing. Didn't do lemon tea. And now I'm like, ooh, I'm a little addicted. And I made that tea right on time, so it's drinkable and enjoyable. And well, welcome. How is everyone? Saturday afternoon. It's cold, but we're not as cold as we were yesterday. We're making it through that cold with some, I think, more weather coming, huh? We're going to have a storm. There's my dad. Hi, Dad. I missed you yesterday. Were you on there? Did you come late? Please tell me you listened to the story, Dad, because it was Ray Bradbury, and I know you enjoyed that. Did you hear that story yesterday, Dad? I don't know where we're going to go with today's story. I tried to pre-read it, but the day got away from me, as do most days here at the library. We are a busy library. Yeah, my dad came late, but heard it. It was so good, wasn't it? Full moon. It was so good that I read it on a full moon. That was not planned. That was coincidence, if there is such a thing. Well, I don't mean to be so scattered and trying to fix my clothing and talk to my dad, but it is the end of the week, and I haven't pre-read the story, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Hope I like it. I've liked stories from this book before. I'm going to read something from a book from our book sale. This is not in the collection. This is called Good Night, Beautiful Women. It's by Anna Noyes. I'm reading the last, I should tell you who published it. Hold on, let's see who published it. You know what I read from this? I read that great story about the wife. I think her husband goes missing and he's in the quarry, right? She's looking out the window. She can't find her husband. He's in the quarry at the end, or she's in the quarry. Good Lord, I don't remember. Okay, so this is published by Grove Press in 2016. I think he goes in the quarry. No, she goes in the quarry. She goes in the quarry at the end. Do you remember that one? It's a little spooky. This is a little bit of a spooky book. Oh, my dad said he was late. He was getting a library card. Good for you, Dad. I love that. It's a good library up there. I like that. Okay, let's try this. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know. Let's try it. Saturday afternoon, we're going to go on a little journey here with Anna Noyes from her book, Good Night, Beautiful Women. The name of this short story is Homecoming. I moved back to my hometown with my husband, which was my first mistake. Actually, at that point, he wasn't my husband, though we're married now. I wanted to be claimed as a wife for the sake of my own tenuous survival. In those early days in Maine, I often envisioned walking into the bay, but that sounds more poetic and energetic than what I really felt. Mostly, I wanted to slip down the shower drain or hibernate for the next 5 years until I was prepared to be a wife and mother, and was used to the fact that all my friends lived elsewhere and it was just me and Bruce making meal after meal and eating them on the couch for the rest of our lives. Right after the move, I started to wash my face with oil, thinking that since I was back in rural Maine, I should milk goats and throw away my harsh facial soap. The oil cleansing covered my face with tiny bumps that I spent hours researching online. My research suggested that the phase I was in was generally considered a purging phase, so I kept washing with the oil through fall until the texture of my skin was completely altered. In my phone's photo album, hundreds of pictures of my own face taken to document the purge replaced pictures of friends and beaches and Bruce and me on mountain summits. These were the pastimes of that fall, the oil and watching a show about brides-to-be trying on wedding dresses while Bruce worked at a wine shop where they'd get him drunk sampling wines. Then he'd drive the hour back to my town weaving. The couple of times I got up the courage to confront him about being drunk, he hadn't actually been drinking. I wasn't good. I wasn't any good at telling the difference between Bruce sober and not, and he'd seemed drunk to me. For exercise in sunlight, I dressed each morning in a pair of men's jeans that I imagined a Maine farming woman might wear, slathered my erupting skin with makeup, and braided my hair so I could walk to the end of the driveway and collect the Rite Aid flyers from our mailbox. When I envisioned my wedding, I saw my bare feet walking up a petal-strewn path. I would carry a bouquet of bluebells. The weekend after we arrived in Maine, Bruce planned a surprise for my birthday, a surprise he told my family about and described to me as an elephant. And I felt sure and sharp in my chest that the surprise was a proposal. We drove 4 hours, my mouth dry, imagining how the proposal might play out, and then he untied my blindfold in the parking lot of the University of Maine at Fort Kent, where an upright bassist was to perform all 6 of the Bach cello suites. I had mentioned to Bruce that I liked the cello suites, which I did, but I'd only heard them once, and basically I just liked the cello more than other instruments, like trumpets or flutes, which I didn't like at all. The second surprise was that the bassist, who was playing by memory, forgot his place and had to search his mind for the next notes in front of the few of us gathered in the tiny auditorium, which, during the day, was a science classroom, as evidenced by the periodic table of elements above the stage. The bassist sent the professor who introduced him running backstage while he stood clutching his bass. And once the music stand was set up and the book of sheet music propped open precariously before him, he closed his eyes and resumed playing for one lovely, sonorous second before the score flipped of its own accord to the wrong page. The audience knew this had happened, but the bassist did not. When he opened his eyes, there was nothing for him to do but stop playing to hunt for the correct lost page. While we sat watching, it went on like this all the way through 136 minutes of cello suites. And afterward, he struggled the bass off stage. Bruce and I went to Applebee's, where I ordered a burger, even though I'd been a vegetarian for years. And we talked about the lesser mistakes the bassist had made, which even I, without knowing the Bach cello or classical music, found obvious. Whole swaths of music were missing or improperly timed. Back then, I woke up every morning and looked out the window at the empty driveway of our subdivision and then rubbed the soles of my feet on the soft deer hide my parents had gifted us, receiving from it the kind of comfort one might get patting a dog. With each passing day, I wondered when I would feel returned to myself. The days got dark earlier, and I got out of bed later, stopped eating meals when Bruce wasn't around, and often changed from my pajamas at dusk, knowing he would be back soon. Then, in early October, a red Jeep went cruising by. I remembered a similar red Jeep from when I was little and living across town in the big yellow house that I had started referring to as my parents' house instead of as my home, because now my home was meant to be the prefab Cape house I shared with Bruce. Whenever I called my parents' house my home, Bruce corrected me. A summer girl named Nancy had driven the red Jeep 20 years before, which caused a stir in our 200-person town where nobody drove a red car with the top down, and mostly nobody was young. I remembered her as prim and polite, her hair wet from a fresh permanent that smelled like fruit and poison, helping me onto the back of a fire truck at the 4th of July lobster bake. I was 6 years old. When she graduated college, her sorority picture was printed on the summer paper. She wore a black velvet cloth draped over her shoulders and white pearls. Her tiny hands were cupped beneath her chin. She looked like a president's wife. The story of Nancy's accident made its way back to our town in small portions. She lived in New York City after college, working as a consultant and carrying a leather Coach briefcase. Her muggers hit her over the back of the head. She was found barefoot. The muggers had stolen her shoes and unconscious and stayed in a coma for 6 days. When she woke up, she was different. She spat the hospital jello across the room. She sat for hours on the roof of her building smoking. Work was impossible. She often trailed off mid-sentence. Her ears rang incessantly. She developed vertigo, and during these spells would sit in the middle of the sidewalk or on the shoulder of the street. Twice the police picked her up for public intoxication. Her friends told her she was more fun than she had ever been before. She slept during the day and walked New York neighborhoods at night wearing a man's fedora, drinking from a flask. When people trailed too close behind her, she'd yell at them in the voice of a tiny woman who was about to transform into a Hulk. Get away, as though they were the ones that needed protection from her. She went to Coney Island and rode the log flume over and over without her protective helmet. She came out as a lesbian and wore a sharp-toothed necklace she'd bought on vacation in Costa Rica every day. Her mom stayed with her in New York for 3 months, setting up a prayer shrine at the kitchen table before convincing Nancy to move back to California with her, where she spent her disability money on ring pops, nitrous oxide canisters, 3-piece suits, and a guinea pig named Petal. Some days, all she could do was lie in bed, letting the guinea pig root through her hair, trying to make a nest. She was 35. She could feed herself and dress herself, and she wanted to live unsupervised and not be treated like a top child. She took her guinea pig and the red Jeep, which at this point had a rusted out undercarriage and a sunroof jammed open by 1/8 of an inch, enough to let in rain, and returned to the vacation house alone. Her parents owned a gazebo by the water with glass windows looking out in all watery directions, and seagulls squawking and shitting on the roof as though they would on the roof of a lobster boat. This is where Nancy slept, on a futon on the floor, surrounded by the unearthed vestiges of her childhood. The oversized rabbit pillow with long white hair that shed all over her pajamas. The pilled Ninja Turtles comforter, the lava lamp, the porcelain kittens with blue jewels for eyes. Objects she had long ago packed away into the basement for the day her children might want them. Most of this I would learn later. On that day in October, all I saw was the Jeep and the flash of her hair, which had been brown and was now bleach blonde, nearly white. I spent an hour in the bathroom with the oils and a new kind of powder makeup, applying samples until I had tried on beige neutral and sandy fair and sun-kissed medium, writing notes about each on its post-its that I stuck to the bathroom mirror. Then I thought I might try to clean the toilet, but I had forgotten to buy a toilet brush. I dug through my office, which was simply a room where we hid our unpacked boxes, until I found a penny whistle that Bruce had given me as a stocking stuffer last Christmas. I wrapped the whistle in a plastic bag and used it to push a tissue around the toilet basin. As I did this, I played the rehearsal track for the 100-person choral group I had joined in an effort to make new friends. We met once a week in a church basement 3 towns over to sing songs in Old English that I memorized by ear. The rehearsal track was sung by the choral director, a spunky soprano with bracelets that clattered on her wrists, but she recorded the contralto part with her pitch artificially deepened and slowed. I belted out the one line I had memorized because the lyrics sounded like, "Lay out your Levi's lustily," and pictured someone who looked good in Levi's taking them off and folding them carefully on my bed. The voice on the recording sounded like a demon being melted by sunshine. When I finally made it to the end of my driveway, I opened the mailbox and there wasn't even a flyer, just a birthday postcard from my dentist forwarded from my old address for the 25th birthday I'd celebrated 2 months before. I decided to keep walking along the shoulder of the road toward the harbor when a car came by, which they did on this road at about 65 miles per hour. I stepped from the gravelly shoulder into the ditch and collected the garbage littered there until the garbage was too much to hold. I was still miles away from the dock, so I stacked the Burger King bags, Miller Lite cans, and styrofoam shreds into a neat little pile and left it behind. I had read Stephen King's memoir about life in Maine to try and feel rooted in my own life, and it comforted me to know that he too had gone for long, dangerous walks along the road shoulder. Stephen had been hit by a van that veered into the wrong lane while the driver tried to control his Rottweiler. I imagined the same wild driver was still behind the wheel, careening down this very road with his slobbery Rottweiler as I slogged through the stream of ditch water. I was 10 minutes from my parents' house, but I didn't want them to see me. We had a big deal, though, that we lived in the same town. We could keep our lives separate unless I invited. We had a deal that though we lived in the same town, we could keep our lives separate unless I invited them over or they invited me over for dinner parties, which happened about twice a month. Or sometimes we met in the adjacent town for a sandwich. When I met with them, I wore a pair of bright salmon-colored pants, tied my hair in a ponytail, and talked about the choir, trying to act as though everything was all right. I knew that they had been looking forward to a wedding and to grandchildren from the day they'd met Bruce. "I can die now," my mother had told me that Christmas, "knowing you're happy." She ran her fingers lightly across my back, my head resting in her lap. There was someone else in the world who would take care of me. I wondered what they were doing and pictured them sitting under the arbor my dad had built, smoking pot out of the hookah maybe, and listening to the static-laced Bob Dylan hour on the radio as dark clouds gathered, our 3 yellow labs rolling in the muddy grass. Every time Bruce and I came for dinner, I would have given anything to send Bruce away and stay the night in my mom's bed, eating Pop-Tarts and watching Special Victims Unit with her asleep in the bed beside me and her lumpy wool socks pressed against my leg, surrounded by velvet pillows and her incense smell. Dad's snores rising up from the downstairs where he slept beside the wood stove. But instead, I helped Bruce wash the dinner dishes, resenting his tiring, relentless displays of politeness. And then I'd hug them goodbye and climb in the cold car and drive the 6 minutes to our house in the woods, panicked with homesickness. like I was attending the world's longest sleepover. For years, I lived across the country and hadn't felt a glimmer of desire to move back in with my family. Not once. When I reached the dock parking lot, I could smell the lobster pound that was next door to my parents' house, and I swore I could hear the faint sounds of the labs barking and my mom calling them inside, her wolf whistle carrying across the bay. The dock payphone had been disconnected, but I picked up the phone just in case and listened into it, then walked over to the hut where the sailing students took lessons. There were 6 pieces of rope that the students used to practice their knots attached to a plank above a hitching post. Below each rope was the name of the knot the students were meant to tie. Bow line, anchor bend, sheep shank, halyard hitch, slip, and reef. Sheep's shank and slip were still intact, and I undid those and tried to redo them, but the rope kept coming loose in my hands. I gave up and tied the pieces of rope together in pairs like children's shoelaces. I wanted to walk down to the dock, but someone was sitting on the end of the pier, hunched and small beside the few remaining rowboats. When she turned her head, I saw that it was Nancy. Soon Bruce would be home, his lips purpled with wine, and we would share another bottle together and the squash I had stuffed with leftovers from another type of squash and rice dish, and watch a video he had discovered at work of cats falling in slow motion and landing on their feet. Though I felt shy, I forced myself to walk down the ramp to the dock and sit on the opposite side of the pier from Nancy, slipping my feet, already cold and pruned from my wet sneakers, into the ocean because that's what I had envisioned I would do. I watched my feet in the freezing water, and after some sharp pain, I couldn't feel them anymore. They looked fat and skittish, like they'd taken on a temperament of their own. "Hey, stranger," she called from the other side of the pier. "I see you over there, pretending you don't see me." I wished I could hide myself from her. It felt important that she not recognize me. In the sickly, greenish light of an oncoming storm, my face caked with sun-kissed medium, but there was nowhere to go. She sat beside me and dangled her legs off the dock, her feet next to mine in the water like 2 smaller fish of the same species. "I didn't want to bother you," I said, and she held out her hand to me for a shake. I thought. But when she slipped her tiny freezing hand into mine, she just held it there like I might kiss it. She wore a man's overcoat and a yellow rubber rain hat. I couldn't tell, looking at her, that her brain had been altered in some way, in some grave, irreparable way. She was still a girl who would look good on the cover of a cereal box, upturned nose, freckles, blue eyes, quick to blush. "I don't know if you remember me," I said. "I'm May, Roy and Becky's daughter." "Of course I remember you," said Nancy. "I remember everything." She took off her rain hat. Her white blonde hair was braided in a crooked tangle down her back. "Do you know how to French braid? I've been trying on myself all summer." I started working on the knots. Her hair was brittle as though salted by the sea. The nape of her neck was damp with sweat. Downy, dark hairs hid beneath the blonde. Hair didn't grow on the pink scar behind her left ear. The clouds had turned to purple and then to black, suspended above us. I pulled my feet from the water and waited for the painful circulation of blood. It was time to go. But Nancy had a lot of hair, and I was only halfway down her back. One summer, a pack of teenagers, one of them Nancy, lit candles on the tennis court across the street from my parents' house, held hands, and spun each other in circles, sneakers squeaking as they whipped around faster and faster. Only after the kids left the tennis court did my dad go out and discover the courts littered with beer bottles and yellow wax, which would have to be cleaned by a professional. Never be oblivious like that, my dad said when he returned home, shaking the dregs of their beers into the garden's slug traps. But the next evening, when the courts were clear and it was dark, I snuck across the street and spun with the roller used for squeegeeing the courts dry, dripping the end of its long handle like a dance partner's hands, its weight a counterweight to my body, until I was queasy and I had to lie down. The stars spiraled above me, and I pretended deliciously that I was sick and dizzy from beer, and that everyone else was spinning in the surrounding darkness. I tied off her braid and tried to look her in the eyes. Looking her in the eyes felt like the next best thing to asking about her coma, which I didn't know how to do. When I got up to leave, I reached out and balanced myself on her shoulders. "Please don't go," she said. "If you stay, I'll show you my best secret as payback for the braid." She pulled a slimy sheet of seaweed from the water, smooth and alive, and draped it over the shoulders of my raincoat. "I love your stole," she said. "Is that real mink?" By now, Bruce would be home calling my name. "Look, you're all dressed up now. Come out with me." The rowboats were unruly on the ends of their lines. She untied the smallest one and rooted the oarlocks out from a secret crevice. "I can't," I said, but she climbed into the boat and patted the prow, the sun sinking behind her. "If you don't come, I'll have to row out to the island alone, and that's just pathetic," she said. She dug in her pockets for a tin of sardines and a can of seltzer. "Dinner and drinks. Private island." "I wish I could," I said. "I should get back to my boyfriend." She began to drift out from the dock. "I'm supposed to wear a helmet all the time. Imagine what might happen without your company." I climbed into her boat. When the rain began, I took over rowing. The rain fell so hard, all I could do was laugh. I rowed like a maniac, the oars flailing. By the time we reached the island, it was just light enough for me to follow Nancy's outline along the dark path to its center. Everything was giving off its growth smell in the rain. "I just need a break," she said, lying down across the middle of the path. "Don't worry, this is normal." "What should I do?" I said. "Nothing. I get dizzy. It feels like I'll never stop spinning." I crouched beside her and held her hand, wondering if she was small enough that I could carry her. She pushed my hand away. "No dramatics," she said, rising. She leaned on me to walk. I watched the stream of stars where trees had been cleared for the pathway and tried to let them comfort me. I had visited the island church when I was a little girl, but was still surprised to see its shape hidden in the overgrowth, one side of the steeple rotted away. Inside, the church smelled of raccoon droppings and death and beer. Clusters of bats hung from the rafters. Nancy flicked her lighter and let the flame play over bottles, scraps of newspaper, an acid-washed jean jacket. A tidy collection of sheep skulls lined the windowsill. There was no chance of rowing back now in the dark, in the rain, which was hammering against the roof and leaking in all around us. When I stepped toward Nancy, a rivulet threaded down my neck. "Tell me about your boyfriend," she said, interlocking her fingers with mine. "Bruce is a good guy. A gentle giant." "Bruce," she scoffed. "Does he hold doors open for old ladies?" "He does. That's exactly right." "Tell me about this thing you've got going with Bruce," she said. "Bruce, a fat person's name. I felt sad for him, bored and anguished and sad. Pressed against Nancy, my wet clothes were unbearably cold. I think he's my person, I said. Then she kissed me. She didn't really want to know about Bruce. I kissed back. She was a bad kisser, frenzied and sloppy with too much tongue, and I didn't try my best either. We lay down on the floor of the church together among the newspapers and soggy leaves and the threat of splinters from the rotting floorboards, and she climbed on top of me, the tip of her braid curled against my neck like a snake. In my dreams, I took lovers who were not Bruce, and always in the dream, before sex or after, I would feel a dawning dread. There is someone I'm betraying, I would think, the other lover still inside me, my fingers in their hair. I'd struggle to remember Bruce's name, dredging for the image of his good round face, his thinning blonde hair, his quick smile, the drooping eyelids that made him look sad and weary even as a little boy. He was always so hard to remember, but I always remembered him, and then I searched for him in mad remorse to confess my guilt so fierce it turned the dream lucid. Each time waking up was glorious relief. Whoa there, Nancy said, as though I were a bucking horse. Dizzy spell. And she lay down beside me, droplets of rain falling on her forehead, in my mouth, on the back of my hand. You don't want this, she said. I'm sorry. Tell Bruce I'm sorry. Tell him I'm the loneliest person in the world. I had plans for the church. Bruce and I could scrub it clean and line the floor with colored pillows, hang lanterns from the ceiling, and light candles in the eaves. We would have to keep the wedding small so we could ferry guests out to the island. From the shore, the parade of boats would look like a fisherman's funeral, and sympathizers would gather on the beach to wave, and the low-flying seaplane would tip its wings left and right in salute. I just wanted to be that bride. That was Homecoming by Anna Noyes from a book of her short stories called Good Night, Beautiful Women. Always something different on Frankenstein Tea, that's for sure. All right, everybody, 3:40, time for me to get out of the building. Library is closed for the week. I'm going to try to read Sunday and Monday. I'll try, see if I have internet at home, see if maybe my phone, I can't really use my phone's hotspot because when I don't have internet at home, my son needs it for his classes. But let's see if I can get something working and hopefully read from home, or maybe I'll be motivated to come here. Not sure. I got a really good puzzle going on at home, and I'm excited about it. How's that that's Block Island winter right there. What do we do all winter? We do puzzles. All right. Thanks for coming. I hope you enjoyed. I appreciate you coming and listening, and I'll see you tomorrow, or I'll try to. Bye. Peace. Bye, Dad. Love you.